Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to talk about the first lab, which we should have been talking, I think, 8, 10 weeks back. But because of MLK holiday, we missed that. Ideally, we want to go over this stuff before we begin our lab practicals. But this is also a really great scenario because you have experienced most of the things, and now this lab will make far more sense in its applied aspect. And I really hope that we'll all have a good time for the next maybe 20 to 25 minutes. So, this is what we are going to discuss today. We will talk about data collection and its interpretation. This is the first half of the lab, and in the second half, I'm going to talk about the basic screening procedures and informed consent. But before we dive into the main topic, I want to give you to have an overview of the presentation for you. We will start this discussion with a small exercise as always so that you can just get refreshed and start going. And there I pose some questions in the exercise, and then I will go over them in the coming second, third, fourth, and the fifth point, which is there on the screen highlighted and red. And these are our learning objectives for today. I want to talk about the informational data in the unit system. Then I'll talk about the normative data, and then I'll discuss pre-screening, primarily focusing on informed consent, and discuss how we are going to approach the health questionnaire for the patients. And once we are finished with that, I'll review the key points, and then I will walk you through to a couple of data sheets which you are going to submit as part of your lab assignment. So we are all set and start discussing about the first part, which is data collection and interpretation. Now, I want you to pause the video and go to these three questions which says what is basic data information, what's the purpose of data collection, and why we want to know about unit system. You can take 2 minutes or 3 minutes at max. I urge you again to pause the video, and whatever things comes to your mind related to the answers of these questions, just write down on a piece of paper. Once you are done with it, you can continue with the video, and I'm going to explain about each of these things, and maybe you will have a good learning experience once you have your thoughts in advance with you on a piece of paper. So I'm presuming that you have a lot of thoughts and many of them are really innovative. And now this will give you a background to start discussing about the basic informational data. Now, I want you to think once you go to a doctor's clinic, or you are going to a gym, or you are a part of a research team, you have been given a lot of paperwork to do, lot of forms where you have to write a lot of preliminary information. And that preliminary or basic information which is required at the beginning of all these stages constitutes basic informational data. I have cited a lot of examples so that you can just be aware what exactly comes under basic informational data. It's of course the identification and the name, which is there in each and every form which you fill up. It also tells about the date and time which at which you are doing the activity. It also asks about your gender and age, and depending upon the activity, it may ask you about your height and weight. So these are some of the examples of basic informational data. Now, we are always wondering why we are interested to give all these information every time we are going to a doctor's clinic or whatever place. So there are a certain set of things that which highlights the importance of this kind of data collection. The first one is definitely the identification. Whatever things we are collecting, we want to correlate with your individual identity. That is why they want to have either your name or coding or whatever, so that whatever information they have, it should be related to that particular person. It also sets up a database so that there are measures which can be highlighted, and there are comparison attributes which needs to be there with your data. And the other one is that this can be used further for teaching as well as for different kind of research purposes. So they want to have a set of information about individuals which can be used for the purpose, for the benefit of the individuals themselves and for the benefit of the society as a whole. Now, you have been doing a lot of calculations throughout our lab. Most of the data sheets involve a lot of calculations and conversions. So I want you to know something about the unit system. We have been using them, but maybe we are not aware of the scientific approach which is linked to these unit systems. Unit systems are of two types. One of them is the imperial system, classical or the old system. The other one is the SI system, which is the standard one accepted in the scientific community. So if you look at the SI system, it is derived from a French word which is Système International, and it is the standard one which is used in science. It's there on your screen. For example, if you're measuring weight, you use kilogram. For the length, you use meters. For time, we use seconds. For current, you use ampere. For temperature, it's Kelvin. Or if you are measuring intensity or the luminous intensity, you can have the CT unit. So all these units are considered as the standard SI units. If you compare it with the imperial system, it's the old system, as I have already talked, the old British system of measuring units. But somewhere down the line, we are also using them in our daily lives here in the US. For example, you can see in these pictures that one of the door knobs is just located a yard above the floor level, or the desk on which you are working is 1 square yard. So we are using the measurement, the units of yard, or for example, ounce, or maybe inches. So these are some of the old units. And in the next slide, I'm going to show that these are inner convertible, and we have to convert them in order to, fill in the standard data sheets. So if you see these conversions, for example, we convert meter into feet, kilogram to pounds, seconds into days, the standard one, and Celsius into Fahrenheit, which is again a big temperature unit discussed everywhere. And I've just cited a couple of examples. For example, a kilogram is 2.2 pounds and a meter is 39.37 inches. So the idea is that there exists two unit systems. SI is the standard unit, and there are inner conversions taking place to get the things right. Now, this is important and a big discussion. We have been collecting data, but how we are going to use that data, this is a big question. And I'm really glad that you have been gone through all the labs and you have performed this comparison with the normative data table, whatever data you are collecting in your lab. So I think you will understand this way better now because you have a practical perspective attached to this theoretical discussion. Normative data, as you can see the definition on your screen, is a data from a reference population, and that establishes a baseline measurement, and against that baseline we are checking our measurements. So it's a comparison outline with which we compare things. And the second point highlights that how these normative data tables are formed or how they are created. So they are obtained from, as you can see, large representative sample population from a very wide number of people. For example, I want to cite the example of height. For example, if your height is, let's say, 180 centimeters or 6 feet, then height is collected from the same age, gender, and ethnicity people from a very large number, and an average height has been taken, and that height has been considered as the baseline on the standard. Now, your height of 6 feet is compared with those, so that you should know that as compared to others who are of your age, gender, and ethnicity, are you taller or are you shorter than those people? So you will have a kind of a reference number for comparison. That is what I feel normative data and normative data comparison is. Well, this is the kind of example I have just cited, but it's just in words, so you can always see that. So it provides the insight into the measured values and whether it's above or below the predicted one or the reference one. And I've cited that if you are a 19-year-old American female, this is the data, normative data table against which you are comparing. So you want to go, for example, if your age is 19 years, you want to go here because this is the age. And depending upon your gender, so because it's a female, so I'll ignore these two values and I look into these for these two values. Now, depending upon your height in inches or centimeters, you just want to compare where you are in this data table. For example, if your height is, let's say, 170, it means that the average height is 162. So you are approximately 8 centimeters taller than your average age, gender, and ethnicity peers. Here you go. This concludes the first part of our discussion today, that is about data and normative data tables. Now, the second part is the one which you are going to use in your future careers. So that's very important, and I want you to focus on the second part as much as you can because this is interesting and this is extremely pragmatic as far as your work is concerned in future. So this part is concerned with basic screening and informed consent. Now, we should be extremely aware of the purpose of pre-screening. Now, as the term suggests, screening means that you are evaluating, and pre means that you are evaluating before you are putting somebody either on a treadmill or doing any kind of exercise. So the idea which I have tried to highlight in bold red letters is that you want to identify those people who are at an elevated or high risk of exercise induced either a cardiac death or a myocardial infarction. So before you put anybody on a treadmill, you want to make sure that they are not candidates of getting a heart attack or myocardial infarction or a sudden cardiac death if you make them exercise. So this is the whole purpose of our discussion for the next 10 minutes today, to identify those individuals in a variety of ways. So in order to serve this particular purpose, we have these three goals coming up. We have to identify individuals who need medical clearance before the exercise, or if they are already doing the exercise and you want to increase either the volume or the intensity or the frequency of exercise, you have to take a medical clearance from their treating physician. Now, the other option is that you will come across many individuals who already have a clinical significant disease, but exercise is going to benefit them. But this should be medically supervised, and the exercise regime should be approved by the physician depending upon the type, depending upon the intensity, depending upon the duration, that this much exercise is apt as far as their medical condition is concerned, and weighing the benefits of the exercise or the harm of doing it. Then you have to be very sure of the condition, if in case a person has, which absolutely contraindicates or stops you from doing exercise with that person. Because if you put that person on a treadmill, that will increase his or her chances of getting collapsed or moving into a cardiac arrest. So you should be very clear before making anybody exercise that he is medically fit to do the exercise, or if in case he needs a clearance, you should be able to take the clearance from the treating doctor. Now, in order to serve these goals and purposes, there has to be a chronological, stepwise evaluation to make sure what you're going to do. And these are the 7 parts of the comprehensive screening process, which should be done in order to declare a person fit to do the exercise with or without medical clearance. First thing you want to do is to take an informed consent. Now, what an informed consent is, what are its components, I'm going to discuss just in a while. Then you want to assess their physical activity level using this PRQ plus questionnaire, so that you should be sure what is their physical activity level. You have a copy of this Q plus questionnaire in your manual. If you want to scamper through it, you can definitely do. Then you want to know about the medical and the health history of the individual by asking a few questions related to his present and past illnesses, so that you should be aware of what all kind of medical problems that person is suffering from. Then you want to focus on the current signs and symptoms by again asking a questions which helps you to identify whether you guys need a physician's approval, or whether that person has consulted a physician for those symptoms or signs if they are persisting. The main focus is on the coronary risk factor analysis, because at the end, once you are making somebody exercise, you are putting his cardiovascular system into uh, doing more work. So you should be mostly concerned about the cardiovascular and to some extent the respiratory health of your patient. As far as lifestyle evaluation is concerned, you want to know about the personal history of the patient, which includes smoking, alcohol consumption, kind of drug abuse, etc. Because this may help you to think about a few conditions which are not evident at that particular time, but that can happen if that person do exercise. And finally, after going through all this, you have to decide whether your patient is at a higher risk group, or in a medium risk group, or in a low risk group. So depending upon this information, you have to categorize and then plan to either make the person exercise without a medical clearance or refer the physician for a medical clearance. Now, as I've talked before, I want to discuss about the informed consent, which is there on page 66 of your lab manual. You can definitely take it out. There is a huge number of things which are written there. I want you to focus on the 6 or 7 main things which we look into an informed consent, and I'll very, very briefly talk about them. The first one is the purpose and evaluation of the test. You should make the person very clear about the purpose of your research and what you are going to do with him once he's performing your test, very, very explicitly. Now, this is again a really big thing. You should tell him the potential risk which can happen if he wishes to enter into that study. The risk might be small in number, but you have to highlight them and make sure that the person understands them. Then you have to tell him about the responsibilities and knowledge of the patient about what tests you are doing and what are his duties once he gives you a consent to enter into the exercise program. This one, most of the people want to highlight that, because you want to make sure that you highlight your positive part of your research or your test, so that the person should feel that if he is indulging into this program, he will get benefited from it. So you want to highlight the benefits as much as possible, but don't try to fabricate things which are not going to happen. You should always be ready for a lot of questions, because you have made the questionnaire, you have been doing the test, so you have a lot of knowledge, but the other person is too naive to understand all the things. So you should be aware of, you should be ready to tackle these questions and try to answer them as comprehensively as possible. Privacy, one of the biggest issues, and you should be really careful and be sensitive in doing with this issue. Complete privacy and confidentiality should be maintained while performing any kind of procedure or test. And then, after explaining all these things, always aware that it is 100% the freedom of the person to indulge into the program, or he can refuse without any reason. So it's totally up to him or her to be a part of the program or wants to opt out of the program. Now, this is a really big and exhaustive list. It's given in table 2.2 of your chapter, and you can always go through it. But I want to highlight some of the big things which are written here. As I've talked about in the pre-screening 7 steps, that the whole idea of this questionnaire is to try and identify the potential diseases depending upon the past history, depending upon the current signs and symptoms, divided by the different systems, whether it's the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the musculoskeletal system. These are the 3 systems we are interested to evaluate, because we are going to use those 3 systems for doing exercise with these patients. Now I think we are very much at the end of our presentation, but again I want to highlight the key points which we have already discussed before. Sorry, we move on to our lab data sheet discussion. We have talked about the importance of preliminary data collection, what constitutes preliminary data, how we are going to do data collection, and what is the purpose behind it. And once you'll get some data, how you compare it with the normative data tables. Then we have discussed about the components of evaluating patient before putting them onto a treadmill or a resistance training. And we have discussed in detail about informed consent and the health questionnaire, which should be used as a part of your pre-screening procedure. Now I actually walk you through to our lab sheets which you're going to do, and I will exactly tell you how you're going to approach it, because we are not doing it live in the lab, and there might be a few questions which you have if you go through them, and we are doing it a bit differently what we normally do if we have a live discussion. So I'll just try my best to do it, and if you have questions, if you still have questions, then just feel free to tell me. Okay, so this is lab activity 1.1. So I have put a PDF on the blackboard, and wherever I have put a cross, you don't have to worry about it. And I have already entered some of the data which I've made up, and I want you to use that data to fill in the data sheets. So as far as this basic information is concerned, you can type in your name, the date. In the tester column, again, you can write your own name again, put the time, put your age, the gender, the age, and then put your height in inches and your weight in pounds, and convert it into meters and kilograms respectively. So this is a kind of a column which you want to fill in at the beginning of this exercise, and then ignore every information which is there on the page 1, and directly move to the top of page 2. Again, just ignore all this information and come directly to the height assessment. So I have entered 3 just made up heights 70, 71, 71. And then first you have to convert all three into meters, take an average of trial 1, 2, and 3, put it here, and then convert it into meters. Now your task is to be very careful filling the columns from here on, because you have to use the table 1.3 to get an average height as of your age, and then convert it into inches or meters, whatever it is. So you should go to table 1.3, and depending upon your age, just see what is the average height for your age. And then this is the actual height which you have mentioned on page 1 here, and you subtract the average height which you got here from this height, and be sure that the units should be in meters, and you'll get either a positive or a negative difference here. You put this difference value here, and this is average height, so you have to put the average height which you get here, not the one which you got there. It's not your height, it is the average height which you get from the table 1.3, and then just get the percentage by multiplying it with 100. You do some similar kind of stuff with the weight. So you get, I just made up three weights, 180, 182, and 180. Convert these pounds into convert this pounds into kilograms and put a 0 here, and then average these 3 pounds here, average these 3 kilograms, trial 1, 2, and 3 here. So you will get an average age. Now, you want to get the elbow breadth ideally from you, but I just made up another data, convert it into centimeters, and then using the frame size, get the using table 1.4, get your frame size. So this table provides you the small, medium, and large frame size depending upon the elbow breadth. So you'll get the elbow breadth here, so just use the table to get the frame size. Now you have to use table 1.5 using your height. So depending upon your height, you will have a weight which is there for your age and height, and then you have to tell about the range. So the range is written at the top of the table, and then you have a similar kind of stuff for the metropolitan life insurance height and weight range. So I have highlighted you need to use table 1.6 and 1.7. So this is upon the males and females. Again, you have to take your height into consideration at the beginning, and then depending upon your height, you will get a height range in meters or inches, whatever, and then you'll have a range again. So in this column, whether it's the NIH or it's the metropolitan, you have to write the range, and this one is your expected weight or height depending upon your individual height. I know it's complicated explaining it without the tables in front of me, but I think if you see this discussion and you have your lab manual tables in front of you, it is pretty self-explanatory. If you still have questions, just feel free to email me. This is all about lab 1.1. This is another activity. So I'm going to upload 6 case histories which states as subject 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and there are 6 different case histories. Don't try to do it for subject 1 because I'm doing it for you. You can choose from 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, whatever you want, but make sure to write your subject number at the top so that I should be aware that if you're filling form 2.1, which subject you are, evaluating for. The other thing I want you to do is that if you are doing this exercise, just make sure to fill all the columns and don't stop somewhere in the middle. I will try to do this for you as an example, and I hope that it's pretty straightforward. So as you can see, the subject 1, it says that Candice is a 65-year-old female who has worked as a professional rancher for 35 years. She describes herself as active due to her work responsibilities, which include morning manually moving 25 pounds of cattle feed daily, horse riding 3 to 4 times per week for 40 to 60 minutes each time, and occasional horse grooming. She had a knee replacement last year due to arthritic changes. She sees a doctor regularly but isn't being tested for any health issues and take no medications but does take vitamin supplements. When asked, she denied having any kind of chest or lower extremity pain or with exertion. She sometimes feels winded after moving 5 or more feet back, which subsides when she rests. She never had any issues with fast heartburn, lower extremity swelling, or passing out. She's coming to you to be evaluated so that she can get back some of her leg strength and flexibility. So you have to open this form 2.1, read the case history, and try to mark the important findings. So whatever important finding I feel we have here is, I just highlighted it, that she is riding 3 to 4 times per week for 40 to 60 minutes each time. This is her current physical activity level. So if you see the step 1, you can see there are a lot of options there, whether it's the chest discomfort, unreasonable breathlessness, dizziness, ankle swelling, or palpitations, or any kind of intermittent claudication, which is the last point, burning or cramping sensation in the legs. If you did not mark any of these, it says stop. You can stop, but you should make sure that you have to go to step 2 and 3. And it says here again, if you did not mark any of the symptoms, continue to step 2 and 3. So with this case study, I can't see anything here. So you can just leave it and move to the step 2 part. This will ask about the current activity level. So it says that has your client ever performed structural physical exercise for at least 30 minutes, moderate intensity 3 times a week. And that's what I have highlighted here, because it's 45 to 60 minutes and it's 3 to 4 times a week. So she is doing this activity. So you have to put a yes here. And then let's look at step 3. Don't stop. It says continue to step 3. And then we have again a plethora of medical conditions there, which I can't see anywhere in the history. So you can put a cross, but you can leave them as well. And after evaluating step 2 and 3, it says if you do not mark anything, medical clearance is not necessary. So because you haven't marked anything in step 2 and 3, the medical clearance is not necessary. So the idea is to read the history, try to identify the points which are giving these questions in the history. If you find one, then just proceed accordingly. I hope it's clear what I've explained about the lab activity. If you still have questions, and I'm again reiterating, just feel free to email me, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions as quickly as I can. This is our last lab, and we are done with all 10 labs. So it's a great times which I've spent with all of you, and I'm glad you all have submitted your blood pressure logs. Now it's time for you to start preparing for your final exams, and I really wish you a lot of good luck for your exams. Thank you very much.